Yesterday I started a series where I'm going through those who are claiming to be the Most High's prophets and those who are claiming to be the Messiah himself individually. With all of the false prophets and the false messiahs in the world today, you must ask yourself why it is happening this way. I will tell you, our Creator is allowing it for a reason. And the reason is to be a witness against those who will not believe him and come to him. Satan knows that the true witness would come on the scene, and he also knows that many would not accept that Yeshua is the first witness because of their preconceived beliefs that are based on the translation errors in Revelations 11 that people have been programmed by, thinking that they're both going to lie dead in the streets and such. So he has a snare in place for everybody that is given over to him to be sifted. This is most important for each of you to understand. Not one of you is going to figure out who the true witness is from your own intellect. You're going to have to turn to your Creator's instructions and let his word tell you who his servant is. Also, you will need his seven spirits, and the only way that you are going to receive them is if you enter into a covenant with him. For that matter, you might ask yourself why none of these other prophets, at least the ones that I know of, are even speaking of his seven spirits when it is prophesied that the two witnesses would be. And such a big part of the two witnesses, I'll read here in a second. And these spirits are outlined in Isaiah chapter 11 as well, if you want to read them. We are told that they would be sent out to the whole world in Revelations chapter 5, verse 6. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the four beasts, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb as it had been slain, having the seven horns and the seven eyes, which are the seven spirits of Elohim that are sent forth into all of the earth. Here we see that Yeshua has these seven spirits, and I will read of another place in a minute that also says this and show how it is additional proof that he is the first witness. You should marvel that none of the many self-proclaiming prophets that are in the world today are speaking of these seven spirits. They are directly tied in with Zerubbabel, who is one of the two olive trees, and the two olive trees are the two witnesses. It's easy between the prophecies and the Revelations and Zechariah to determine this. In Zechariah 4, chapter 10, we read, "For who has despised the day of small things? Because they will rejoice, and they will see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those seven. They are the eyes of Yahweh, which run to and fro through the whole earth." I just read to you where the seven eyes are his seven spirits. I'm amazed at how simple this is, but most of you still want to scoff. The word of Elohim testifies to the work that his servants will be doing and who they are, just as they testified to Yeshua the first time that he came. In this verse, you see two undeniable identifications as to the part of the work that Zerubbabel will come forward with. He is going to come with a measuring rod and the seven eyes of Yahweh. The plummet that is spoken of here is the measuring rod, just as the reed that is spoken of in Revelations 11 is the measuring rod the temple was measured with. I've spoken about this in detail in other videos, so not the purpose of this video. The next verse tells us that Zerubbabel is one of the two olive trees. The word Zerubbabel means one that has flowed out of the captivity, or one that was delivered out of the captivity. I have spoken in other videos about how Zechariah 3 shows that Yeshua, our high priest, would enter into the final stone of the temple, just as he entered into the 143,999 others who have been sealed, that made up the temple, his father's temple. Zerubbabel is the brand that would be plucked out of the fire and that would bring forth the seven spirits of Elohim and the measuring rod. As I said, the other olive tree has his seven spirits as well. If we read there in the verse in Zechariah, here's another verse that shows this as well in Revelations 3:1. "And to the angel of the called out ones of Sardis write, these things says he that has the seven spirits of Elohim." This is talking about Yeshua himself, the first and the last, the true and faithful witness. Today I'm going to talk about a false prophet named Ron Weinland. I lead up to Ron today with this example of the 7 spirits, because these 7 spirits are not part of Ron's witness, nor does he bring forth the measuring rod that Yeshua testified to. I'm not sure what measuring rod he even has. Most of you, not even sure if he's ever spoken of it. So anyway, most of you probably have never heard of Ron yet, but he will be magnified by the coming destruction because he has prophesied the coming destruction, just as many others have. Of course, they prophesied it with error, but that's another point as well. And actually, Ron's already been proven false by his false prophecies and error, but many will ignore those proofs that he's false and believe him still when things start to happen. Does Ron Weinland or any of the others who are claiming to be the witnesses bear these identifications of Zerubbabel? The answer is no. Ron claims that he and his wife are the 2 witnesses. He has also claimed to be Zerubbabel because he understands that Zerubbabel is one of the 2 witnesses. As my father called me out of the captivity, he drugged me through some of the enemy camps to show me how deep Satan's deceptions run. The last of these camps was Ron's organization. I knew we were approaching the end, and I was seeing the lies of Sunday worship, and I got snared by a short season in Satan's Saturday camp. I came across Ron's organization and was delighted that there was one who was claiming to be one of the witnesses, and that he was announcing a similar time frame that I had been shown to be true. I was also delighted because it relieved me from some of the things that were happening in my mind. I felt that my father was calling me out of the world and it created a heavy responsibility, but I did not know what yet he was calling me out for. And now there was a man that was bearing the burden, so that was actually a relief. The problem was I kept calling out to my father for truth, and Ron's doctrines continued to not add up. In the beginning, I tried to force them to add up some of the other things I had been shown, but anyway, I tried to make them fit into these things, but as time went on, it got tougher to reconcile his teachings to what I was being shown, because I was coming to the call out of the captivity. It is important to understand that I was still in the captivity, but I was being called out of it. I was not very well versed in the Old Testament, but I started to have difficulties with Saul of Tarsus's writings anyway, because they were contradicting Yeshua's teachings. As I kept growing in the truth and departing from Ron's errors, our Creator began to show me that he was making me his witness against mankind. Dad, this is a pretty scary thing to have happen to you. I mean, it actually goes back into childhood, but I'm not going to go into all that, but it's just something you run from. Certainly something I ran from anyhow, and I stayed in the captivity because I was running from it. With this understanding, I saw that Ron's wife Laura was not the second witness. In this process, my father showed me that he had authorized me to turn the water into his son's blood, so I approached Ron through his false hierarchy with this truth. Even though I could no longer reconcile Ron's teachings to what I was being given, I was trying to hold on to that he might still be the other witness, because he had announced Yeshua's return on the Feast of First Fruits in 2012, and I was in agreement with this. I thought that just maybe he had part of the truth and I had the other part, and they were to be reconciled together and go out to the world. I thought that maybe Ron was being called out of his false doctrines as well, because this is what was happening to me. I actually struggled with this for a long time before approaching him, because it definitely something you have to be right on, and I feared being wrong with all of my being, just as each of you had better fear being wrong as well. Of course, I did not yet know when the Feast of First Fruits is either, because I was still using a false counting system for counting the days to this feast, as Ron did and as he still does today. And that, of course, means that he has the wrong day for Yeshua's return. Needless to say, when I announced to Ron that I was the witness, I was immediately kicked out of his organization. And what a relief. Obviously, Satan was allowed to give Ron a perverted form of the date, just as he is allowed to give his servants other part truths. This is how Satan's deceptions lure so many in. And it ain't so because everything's lies. He mixes in truth with them. And of course, Saul of Tarsus did the same thing. Wasn't everything Saul taught wasn't lies. I just had many lies and many perversions mixed in. Now my father had my undivided attention, and I had learned how easy it is to get snared by the enemy, even though I was coming to my father's call. And I certainly had partial protection, and he let me be sifted to a degree, and this was to teach me things, and this taught me much. We are not there until we are there. There was still a reason why Satan had access to me, and I had to learn this. Satan still has access to us until we are completely sold out for our Creator's will and doing it and living it. And that's when we come underneath his umbrella of protection. I'm amazed that there are a group of people who deem me to be false in lieu of this short season in Ron's camp. And I'm going into this for a reason. Just the point is this whole thing is not about Ron or about me or about anything. It's about what's true. So I spoke of that in other videos as well. I say that I'm amazed by the fact that this group of people deems me false because the second witness was prophesied to be plucked out of the fire. Why can't people just believe scriptures? How was he going to be plucked out of the fire if he was not in it? Crazy. Of course, these people do not believe my father anyway. If they did, they would know that I am his servant because his word gives undeniable proof that I am, if they would just believe him. He told us in Ezekiel 24 that one would escape the captivity and bring forth this sign. I'm going to go through this again today because Ron has not brought forth this sign. This sign is 5 commandments going out to those who would return to him in the last days. Number 1, we are to cover our heads as a sign of coming under the covering of his protective wings and coming under the covering of his son's blood. Number 2, we are to keep our shoes on our feet, which is symbolic of making ourselves ready for the second Exodus. Number 3, we are to not mourn or lament over the coming destruction of those who will not return to him. Number 4, we are to no longer eat of the bread of men, which means that we are to let his unleavened bread of life become our sole source of our instructions. Not listen to all the horrors and the harlotry speak what they say truth is. Number 5, we are to not cover our lips, which is symbolic of crying aloud and helping him sound his trumpets. He says that when one escapes out of the captivity with this sign, you can know that it is from him. So you can see how foolish it is for someone to call me false for my short season in Ron's camp. Zerubbabel had to be plucked out from the fire, and he had to be clothed in filthy raiment. How else was he going to come forth with this sign? Actually, it's my father's design that I was led through the valley of the shadow of death. So you are speaking against him if you discredit me for this. Has Ron Weinland or anyone else for that matter brought forth this sign? The answer is no. There is no way that the eternal, almighty creator of all things would allow an impostor to bring forth a sign that he said when it comes forth, you can know that it is from him. Any of you who want to deny his sign are calling him a liar, and somehow I just don't like your chances if you are doing this. I started off exposing the false prophets and the false messiahs yesterday with exposing a man that calls himself Lord Rael, who says that he is the Messiah. Both this man and Ron are still almost unheard of in the world today, just as I am. But as the destruction intensifies, all 3 of us and many others will be hurled into the limelight. I'm actually not looking forward to this at all, but I have a job to do. People want to say this is ego, having this job. No. Anyway, it is important to understand why this is being allowed, why all these false people are being allowed to speak. Satan has been allowed to stage his counterfeits to the truth because our Creator is demanding that you believe him. It should be obvious to you. A good example of this is people not believing his promise in the Ezekiel 24 sign that I just shared with you. People who are dismissing this sign want to make it sound like I came up with this sign or something. It's crazy. Our Creator did not say that he was going to come down here and speak with you directly before Yeshua returns. He said that he was going to send his 2 olive trees. And he said that he would send them forth as one stone. You can't get around this. It isn't Ron and Laura Weinland or any other dynamic duo because there's a couple other dynamic duels I'll be talking about in the coming days as well. And actually, one person actually understands that, one of the false witnesses understands, they think that Yeshua is the other witness, so Satan's been allowed to see that and stage that as well. So anyway, Yeshua is not going to appear to you before next July 18th, so until then, you have the one who his word testifies to. The other olive tree is speaking through me. If you deny his words, you are denying him. And the works that he has sent me to do bear witness to who his witness is. I am going to give you a list of some of Ron's false doctrines and some of his omissions of our Creator's word. Moses tells us that if anyone adds to his instructions or takes away from them, they are false. Ron believes in and teaches a false Sabbath day that is fixed on Saturday on the pagan Roman calendar. Our Creator's word clearly proves that his weekly Sabbaths are to be determined by his calendar, just like the rest of his appointed times are. And of course, the hypocrisy with Ron and many others is they use a perversion of his calendar to determine the other appointed times, but not the Sabbaths. And just think about the hypocrisy there. If you fear being wrong on this, you will examine the evidence. It is impossible to refute. Instead, most of you will just scoff. Number 2, Ron does not worship on the new moon days as we are commanded to, nor does he teach his flock to do so. Ron trusts in doctors and medicines to heal him, and our Creator condemns this. Ron upholds the writings of the abomination of desolation, Saul of Tarsus, and my Father's word clearly proves that Saul is false, and his prophecies prove that Saul is the abomination of desolation. And he said all these, I'm going to go into detail of all these because all of them, take a whole video in themselves, but there's a video called The Abomination of Desolation if you want this explained. Ron comes in his own name, and he bears witness to himself. There is not one scripture that testifies to him to identify him by his fruit or anything else. Ron does not observe the Torah, nor does he teach it. Yet his word says that the one who would be brought forth would be declaring for us to remember the Torah of Moses. It says this in Malachi. And of course, Ron, all that stuff. You can talk about the beard laws or just the things on a physical commitment. I've even actually heard him mock the Jewish people for putting up a form of what the people calling themselves Jewish, for putting up a form of the commandments. And of course, they pervert things the way they do them, but still, he's mocking a commandment there. And heard him mock other commandments as well. But I've spoken about them in false prophets videos and stuff that I posted earlier on the site. Number 7, Ron has not been given a change of remnant, nor a head covering as Zechariah prophesied. And of course, I already mentioned that he hasn't commanded his followers to cover their heads either, and this is clearly because he couldn't bring forth that sign, because nobody could. It was reserved. Number 8, Ron has not sought to turn the hearts of the children back to the hearts of the patriarchs, nor has he told them how the hearts of the patriarchs will be turned to those who do turn their hearts. His works are not in agreement with the works that were laid out for the 2 witnesses as recorded in the scriptures. Yes, he speaks of man rejecting their Creator's word, but so does he. Just as old Raymond that I spoke of yesterday speaks of man rejecting their Creator, but his teachings testify that he does the same as well. I went through some of these yesterday. Ron is a hypocrite, just as the other false prophets are hypocrites. Number 9, Ron observes and teaches the wrong timing for the Passover. Well, that's a big one. And the wrong timing for the Feast of First Fruits. I've already talked about that because he uses a perversion of the sacred calendar and those calling themselves Jewish, and he does not believe our Creator's instructions for how to determine the Feast of First Fruits. He trusts in those calling themselves Jewish today and their perversions. Number 10, he teaches a false apostasy and a false man of sin that is based on a lie that the worldwide Church of God is Elohim's true church. It's just insanity. And I had a hard time believing that one back then as well when I was there, trying to force myself to. But anyway, number 11, he does not really talk about the mark of the beast much that I can remember, but I think that he is saying that Sunday worship is the mark, like many of the Seventh-day Adventists claim. And actually, his false Saturday Sabbath is just as much a part of the mark as Sunday worship is, because the mark of the beast is all rebellion. And I've done videos on this as well. Number 12, Ron does not set aside the seventh-year Sabbath, nor teach his flock to do so either. He has so many other false doctrines and false beliefs, but he also has some things correct. This is how Satan works. I'm not sure how big his flock is now, but because of the books that he has published and the number of books that went out and such, I expect that there are quite a few still sitting on the fence and watching him to see what will happen in the coming days. In any case, as I said, when things heat up, and they will, Ron and many others will come into the limelight. Just remember, this was allowed to happen for a reason. And you need to measure everything against that reason as well. Scripture tells us that there will be one false prophet in particular who will deceive many. Will it be Ron, or will it be Raymond that I spoke of yesterday, or it will be another? These two certainly appear to be poised to be candidates, but both are false nevertheless, just as there are many others who are false. It is going to be interesting in these coming days. I know the word just says that not that many are going to be brought through this, because most will believe the lies or stay in their lies. The point is, Satan has every exit covered but one. Only the truth will set you free. It set me and 143,999 others free, and it will set you free. This is not a game, and close is not going to count. You are not going to be set free by holding on to part truths. Part truths are still lies. Sadly, Ron's truths will sound more palatable to many of you than my Father's truth. My Father's truth is He made you to be made in His image, and He accomplishes this through walking with Him on His narrow path, the path that Ron rejects. It's His Torah. His image is perfect righteousness, and perfect righteousness spells love. It's what the Torah teaches us. Each of you is going to need to decide which of the host of prophets that are already in the world today, or that will still emerge, has Yeshua speaking through them. Ron claims that he has Yeshua speaking through him. Well, he has Yeshua in Saul of Tarsus, and obviously that's a contradiction there, because Saul of Tarsus contradicts Yeshua, so obviously his Messiah that he has speaking through him is none other than the voice of Satan, and he is of his father the devil. Most of you know that we are at the end, so excuse me, you should not marvel that there are many false prophets and many false messiahs. This was prophesied to happen. The word of Elohim explains that there will be one stone, not two. The first entered into the last, therefore he is the first and the last. I suggest that each of you do not use your own understanding or your own intellect or your emotions to determine who his true servant is. Emotions can be a very dangerous source of understanding. Recently I witnessed a group of people who were coming to the truth get taken out by the enemy because the truth stepped on their toes and their emotions got the best of them. The word of Elohim will testify to who his servant is, just as it will testify to who is false. Also, the works that they do will testify to them. Examine the works that have been put forth on this site in these videos or on the www.repairingthebreach.info webpage, and ask yourself if these are not the works of one sent forth to repair the breach between Elohim and man. Ask yourself if the works that have been brought forth are not rebuilding the old waste places of the patriarchs of old. Who is doing the works that our Creator's word says that the witness will be doing? There is only one, and it is not Ron Weinland. I will close today by giving you one more caution. It is, do not rely on your own understanding that comes from your preconceived beliefs to decide who is true and who is false. Satan has deceived the whole world. This includes each of you, just as it included me. I had to be delivered, just as each of you need to be. An example of letting preconceived beliefs get in the way is dismissing me by saying that no one knows the day or the hour of Yeshua's return. Many believe this, even though there is much evidence in the scriptures that it was sealed until the time of the end. You want to deny all that evidence and just hang your hat on one verse? Yeshua's words elsewhere testify that he was speaking, that no man knew the day or the hour back then, not even himself. It was sealed until earlier this year. Isaiah recorded in chapter 61 that Yeshua would proclaim the day and the year of his Father's vengeance, and he has proclaimed this through his servant. Why don't you believe this prophecy or the rest of his prophecies? Yeshua said in Revelation 3 verse 3, "Therefore be mindful of the manner that you receive and hear, and guard and repent. If therefore you will not stay awake, I will come on you as a thief, and you will not know the hour that I will come upon you." Is this not saying that if we are repenting and guarding his truth and being diligent, that we will know the hour? Of course it is. People are letting their preconceived beliefs on this, not knowing the day or the hour, cloud their judgment. Ask yourself, how could Yeshua not know the day or the hour now? He said he didn't know. He said he didn't know back then. Of course he knows. He just said that he did not know back then. He knew that no man knew but his Father. It was sealed until the time of the end, just like Yahweh told Daniel it would be. Do you think Yeshua didn't know this? You don't think he knew the writings of Daniel? He certainly spoke of Daniel. He says that he does nothing without revealing his secrets to his servants, the prophets. It was sealed until the last of the 144,000 were sealed into his family. I was the last. The temple was finished off with me, and his word testifies to this. It testifies to the fact that I'm Zerubbabel. It is not my words making this claim as it is with Ron Weinland and the rest of those claiming to be his prophets. Let's just assume that I'm delusional for a second here. Even if I was, would not the two witnesses know the day when it was time for them to know? Whoever they are, they would know. It's crazy to think otherwise. I'm just telling you who our Creator's word says that they are, who the witnesses are, and they are not Ron Weinland, nor his wife, nor the others that I will be speaking against in the coming days. If you want to bank your delivery through the coming time of affliction on your interpretation of one scripture with no regard to the rest of what the scriptures say, this is your choice. You also have to deny all of the proofs that he has given us, and you have to call him a liar, or say that the word of Ezekiel was false, to deny that I'm speaking on his authority. You also have to deny what he has given about the turning of the water into his son's blood. It should be obvious to you that our Creator has allowed for many false prophets and false messiahs to come forward for a reason. So hopefully you will understand that he has allowed this for the reason that he is going to separate off those who will not believe his word. If you want to ignore his signs, ignore his proof of who he has given the key of his word to, this is your choice. Sadly, it is written that most of you will make this choice.